I think lawyers have to start being more comfortable with change management. I think
Mm-hmm.
lawyers have to start being more comfortable with risk management. That's the biggest barrier to everything. And I'm seeing that improve. Like you see a lot of these attorneys who are like 60s, 70s, 80s moving out of the practice. A lot
Mm-hmm.
more attorneys who are 40s and 50s taking over practices, and they
Yeah.
have a more open mind. But then the other big issue I see outside of the attorneys is like the lack of structured data. Like if you
Mm.
want to start running analytics, if you want to have machine learning going at a high level, the data needs to be structured. Yeah, layperson's term might be labeled more effectively.
Welcome to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc., where we feature experts in growth and brand visibility for law firms and architecture, engineering, and construction firms. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, I'm Michelle Calcote King. I'm your host, and I'm the principal and president of Reputation Inc. We're a public relations and content marketing agency for law firms and legal services companies and other professional services firms. To learn more, go to rep-inc, that's inc with a K.com. So today we're going to talk about the legal tech market, and it's growing quickly. In 2021, it generated about 27 billion in revenue. In the United States alone, it's expected to exceed 35 billion by 2027. As a side note, my team here has written some great blog posts, especially recently, to help legal tech professionals navigate and boost their PR. So go ahead and check out those on our website. But today we're going to dive into the trends that are impacting the legal tech industry, how emerging technologies are helping law firms and in-house legal departments modernize and improve their operations. So today I'm speaking to Jared Correia. And in fact, I always ask how to pronounce
I
the name and
know
I
it's
forgot
a tough
to.
one. There's too many vowels, more
Did I
vowels than
butcher it?
consonants. Yeah, that's pretty bad. No, but in all seriousness, it's Korea, like the country.
Oh, Korea. There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
It's even simpler than that. So
Yeah, I love it. So Jared's the founder and CEO of Red Cave Consulting. He's a business management consultant for law firms, and he's a legal tech entrepreneur. He's
yeah,
also
and here I am working from my kitchen with everybody
there
passing
you
behind me.
go. Well, he's a seasoned podcaster, so I'm really looking forward to this. So welcome to the show. Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
me.
Thank you. I
So
brought my
yeah,
best mic just for you.
there you go. I like it. Tell me about Red Cave. If you can, just kind of give me a background how you ended up in this area.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was necessarily planned. So I went to law school after college, not
Yeah,
having any idea what I would do with my life,
yeah,
because who knows
yeah,
what they're going to do
yeah. Who
when they
knows? Yeah,
graduate from
exactly.
college with an
Yeah.
English degree? Like, what do? I don't know. So I was like, oh, I'll go to law school. That sounds like fun. And I
Yeah.
got to law school and I was like, wow, this is horrendously boring. So when I was in my second year of law school, I went to the career development office and I'm like, I think I should do like business consulting for lawyers because they don't
Hmm.
seem to be great at business consulting. And they were like, hey, maybe you should get a real job, like a lawyer job. That's kind of how it went. And then like randomly, like 4 or 5 years later, after working in law firms for a little bit, Massachusetts launched this free consulting program for attorneys. And I
Uh-huh.
started working there, worked there
Oh,
for about
wow.
8 years, and then started my own company, which I've been running for almost 10 years at this point. And then a few years back, I also started a software company with a partner of mine as well. So I got a
Nice.
couple irons in the fire. Yeah.
That's amazing that you thought about consulting back in college. It's one of those things you don't really, especially kind of business consulting for lawyers. I haven't heard of anyone having that light bulb moment that early on.
Yeah, it was just I was in these law firms like on internships, and I was like, my
Uh-huh.
God, this is like a dumpster
Yeah.
fire. Like, what is going on? I'm like, I could do better than this. So
Gosh,
that's kind of how it worked for me.
that's fantastic. Tell me about the software company.
Yeah, so about I want to say 4 years ago we launched this. It's chat bot for intake, qualification, scheduling, and then document assembly for
Okay.
law firms. So the idea is that you can qualify leads, and then once those leads become clients, you can produce documents off of a
Uh-huh.
chat-based interface. And we've had a lot of success with that. People like clients like building documents via chat through law
Yeah.
firms, and it takes a lot of the lift off the law firms. So we got a bunch of
Nice.
firms we're working with on that.
And what sort of management consulting are you doing? Are you doing it mostly in the tech area, or are you advising firms on other issues?
Oh yeah, so my pitch to law firms is like, imagine if you had a partner who actually knew how to run a business. That's me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so we engage people usually a couple times a month. We do like a bi-weekly meeting just to keep things moving forward, but
Hmm.
it's super broad. I've always been like really shallow in terms of like the categories. So it could be technology, it could be marketing, it could be financial
Hmm.
management. And then I don't do the implementation stuff and I'm not building websites. So what's really cool is that I've met a lot of people in the industry who do good
Yeah.
work at
Yeah.
very specific things. So I
Mm.
can say, okay, I can help you with this, or I can help you construct a plan around this, but you're going to need these 3 service providers as well who can help
Right.
you. And I got great recommendations to make for that. So that's kind of being like an outside business partner
Yeah.
ish, sort of
Hmm.
working as far as this is concerned. Then, in addition to working with law firms directly, we also have partnerships with around 20 bar associations where we're
Mm.
the consulting partner for the bar association. And
Mm.
that's cheaper for the bars than hiring someone in house to do that
Hmm.
work.
Mm. Fantastic. So, well, let's talk about legal tech.
Yeah.
So you've kind of carved a niche in the legal tech area. I know you do a lot of writing and speaking
Mhm.
about legal tech. So tell me your take on, what the market's seen this year and kind of where it's going. I'd especially be interested in your thoughts with all this talk around a recession and how that's going to impact legal tech. Sorry
I
to
know
just
everybody
throw a
asks me.
lot at you there.
No,
Threw
it's
you the
so
kitchen
funny.
sink.
Everybody's like, "What about the recession?" I
I
don't know. I'm not.
know,
I'm
I
not an
know.
economist. I have no
I'm sort of
idea.
tired of,
I mean,
I feel like we've been talking about recessions for
it seems like it's been
3
a long
years now.
time.
Yeah, I know, I know,
Yeah,
I know.
I don't know. Like, yeah, inflation's high.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't
Hmm.
know if we're in a recession or not. But like, my whole approach to this with law firms is like, yeah, you should be using technology to run your practice because it's going to be cheaper than using people in
Yeah.
certain spaces. But
Hmm.
like, you always want to run a lean law firm
Hmm.
whether there's a recession or not. And
Hmm.
the leaner you can get, the more profit margin you can make, the more efficient you can be. So
Right.
I'm always telling law firms, like, whether it's a recession or not, whether it's high times, you want to be as efficient as possible and running your law firm as effectively as possible because you're making the most money you can in that construct, whatever's happening at that time. Maybe it's less than you would have made 2 years ago, but like it's still pretty good, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I found that like most law firms are not really innovative at all.
Hmm.
Not a lot of law firms are trying new things. Not a lot of law firms are being aggressive about marketing, for example. So the ability to be an outlier in legal, it's
Hmm.
a little bit easier to do that than in other industries where the business owners are
Absolutely.
more savvy. So that's the
Yeah.
way I look at it with folks. And as far as legal tech trends are concerned, um, I guess there's 2 big ones I'm looking at right now. One is all the consolidation that's happening.
Hmm.
So as you know,
Hmm.
like all these larger companies, oftentimes like the case management software companies like a
Right.
Clio or a Filevine or my case, they're either snapping up these smaller companies, or in the case of my case, they're being snapped up by larger
Hmm.
companies like a
Yeah.
LawPay. So I think everybody's got this notion in their head that there's going to be like this operating system for legal. And there's
Hmm.
this big battle between these huge companies about who's going to be the operating system for legal.
Mm.
I think that's a flawed premise, honestly.
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
buy that as being a thing. Like I
Yeah.
think lawyers are too independent, and I
Yeah.
think most lawyers want to choose like the best in class solution
Hmm. And law
rather
firms are
than
different. I know there's a
yes.
lot of similarities, but a small firm versus a large firm, a business firm versus a plaintiff firm. There's quite a variety.
So I'm not seeing a world in which there's like the Lexus and Westlaw of legal
Hmm.
technology. I'm just not seeing
Hmm.
that. And then the other thing I'm seeing is I kind of feel like we're in like the second wave of legal
Hmm.
technology, as I would call it. So the first wave is like 08, 09. Everybody started using the cloud. All these case management software products came out. Rocket Matter came out. Clio came out. Everybody's like, oh, that's awesome. Back office software. That seems to be selling. Let's build
Yeah.
a ton of that. And then nobody built anything else. And so
Yeah.
pandemic hits, and all of a sudden, all these law firms are doing like analog intake. You got to do digital intake, and they have no
Yeah.
way to do it. And there's no
Hmm.
software for lawyers built for that. So now you're starting to see more investments made in front office technology. You start seeing more companies come out in front office technology. You start seeing these back office tools either acquiring systems that can do front office technology or building those features into their own products. And I think
Hmm.
that's going to continue. And I think it's long overdue,
Yeah.
frankly. And that's one of the
Absolutely.
reasons we started a company that was a front office software because there's just
Uh-huh.
not enough of that in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was shocked. I remember during the pandemic, learning that one of my clients, no one had laptops. the entire firm. I know.
What were they using instead? Stone tablets?
Desktops. Yeah. I mean, like you had to be in the office to work. And I thought, are you kidding me? So
Yeah.
yeah, it was quite a wake
It's
up call.
wild. Lawyers cling
Mhm.
to those desktops. It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. I know we all have stories like this, but I still have a client. I don't do a lot of the day-to-day work anymore, but he will print out an email, write his response on it, on the piece of paper, hand it to his assistant who will scan it in and send it back to us. So
Oh,
um
jeez. I was talking to a lawyer last week who was like all out of breath. And I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm taking my desktop out of my trunk and bringing it to my office. I'm like, are you for real right now?
wow, that's
It's crazy. It
wild.
happens all the
Yeah.
time.
hmm What do you see are the areas that you think are going to really continue to grow? So we had the kind of like the pandemic that really kind of put a turbocharge on just, and you mentioned the front office stuff. Are
Yeah.
there certain areas where you think are going to grow moving forward more
Yeah.
than others?
I think the front office tech is going to explode a little bit here,
hmm
which I've already mentioned. The other thing, probably obviously, maybe not, is like the automation,
hmm
triggered automation, behavioral automation, which leads to like the machine learning and the AI. Like
Sure.
I get law firms, for example, ask me all the time, like, can you automate conflict checks? I don't think you
Mm,
can because I don't think the
mm,
technology is sensitive enough right now. But at some point, if you run a viable AI on that, like
hmm
you could be in a position where you could do something like that, where a
Right.
machine could tell you whether there's a conflict and do it in a similar way to how a
hmm
human would do it. And I
hmm
think that's like that technology is at like its nascent stages. If you look at all
hmm
that back office, front office software I'm talking about, none of it uses really at any high level machine learning or artificial intelligence. You're
mm,
seeing some of this stuff happening in like legal research software.
hmm
They're actually starting to use data effectively.
hmm hmm
So the three big things I see, one is like the AI piece that's coming, the use of data analytics by law
Yeah.
firms and software. Like you've seen that happen in sports, you've seen that happen in finance, you've seen that happen in a bunch of other industries where there's more reliance on data so people can make better decisions. No law firms are really doing that right now. So I think the
Yeah.
software is going to start to be developed to do that. And then the other stuff I think is interesting is all these web-based communities. Like
hmm
people look at like, so Facebook changed its name to Meta and everybody thinks
hmm
like Facebook is the metaverse, but there's like a bunch of these different like segregated online communities, which are various metaverses. And you're
hmm
starting to see law firms do things like set up virtual office spaces in there. So I think
Wow.
that's going to start to become more and more utilized by firms. So those are three things that I think are trending right now that you're going
hmm
to see developed over the course of like probably in terms of like AI over the next like 15, 20 years, maybe more.
Yeah. Do you see what's gonna, are there any major barriers that this industry is gonna face that might slow down the growth?
Well, the biggest barrier are the attorneys because they hate
hmm
change.
Right.
And when I talk to people about lawyers, I'm like, people are like, lawyers are risk averse. They're so risk averse. I don't understand why. Well, it's obvious because their job
Their job.
is
Yeah.
to spot every possible
Spot
risk.
risk.
And so
hmm
and so when they look at a new venture, they're
hmm
like, oh my God, look at all the things that could go wrong here. Why
Right.
would I do that? Because if they
Yeah.
were advising a client, they would never do that. But I think lawyers have to start being more comfortable with change management. I think
hmm
lawyers have to start being more comfortable with risk management. That's the biggest barrier to everything. And I'm seeing like I'm seeing that improve. Like you see a lot of these attorneys who are like 60s, 70s, 80s moving out of the practice, a lot
hmm
more attorneys who are 40s and 50s taking over practices, and they
Yeah.
have a more open mind. But then the other big issue I see outside of the attorneys is like the lack of structured data. Like if you
Mm,
want to start running analytics, if you want to have machine learning going at a high level, the data needs to be structured. Yeah, layperson's term might be labeled more effectively. So
hmm
if there are 5 different softwares you're using and they each label a settlement with a different field, it's going to be
mm,
very hard to extract meaningful information from that
yeah.
data. So that's one of the things that's going to have to happen. And both the technology companies and the attorneys are going to have to put a premium on that. And that's just hard work that no one wants to do. So
Yeah.
those are two big, big issues that I see.
Do you think the trends that I've seen in the legal industry are often driven by client demand? The
Mhm.
things like diversity and I mean, diversity is
Right.
the best example I can think of.
That's a great example. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, this isn't altruistic firms. This is clients saying, do it.
Right. Right.
So, do you think clients will have any kind of impact on the growth of this market?
Yeah. And I think they already are.
Yeah.
I think the two big things that are being driven by law firm clients, and it's more of a push the bigger they get, like the bigger
Mm-hmm.
companies are going to demand more of this. And like law firms that operate as outside counsel are starting to see
Mm-hmm.
this already in waves.
Mm-hmm.
The first is efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
A few years back, like Casey Flaherty, who was like CEO, I think, or chief legal counsel over at Kia, the car company, he was
Mm-hmm.
starting to give like efficiency tests to law firms. Like, can you
Wow.
actually like convert a PDF from a Word
Wow.
document? A lot of them couldn't do it because all these companies are upset because a lot of these firms are operating on the billable hour
Right.
that incentivizes inefficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And so why would you learn to do anything more efficiently?
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't.
Yep.
So
Right.
you're seeing a lot of pressure from companies now about law firm efficiency, more challenging of billing, more requests for alternative pricing models as well
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
don't value efficiency as highly.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think in addition to that, the other big thing is data security. So you
Mm.
see a lot of these larger companies say, okay, we've got sensitive legal files on our side, but you as a law firm are also maintaining sensitive legal files. And we see news stories about law firms being breached all the time. So what are
Yeah.
you doing to secure your data effectively? And that's not just any longer about having like a written information security program or a data security document that's like 2 pages long.
Mm.
That's also about like filling out the forms that these companies want you to fill out. I have a friend of
Mm-hmm.
mine who runs IT for several large law firms, and they're asking these firms to fill out like 100-page, 200-page queries about how they manage their data security, and they have
Wow.
no clue how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those questions are only going to get harder. And that this is
Yeah.
in the U.S. We're not even talking about Europe with GDPR.
Right. Yeah. I attended a managing partners forum. Maybe it was last year. And
Mm.
the very beginning of it, they went around and talked about the question was, what's keeping you up at night? So these are managing partners of
Yeah.
mostly smaller firms, defense firms.
Mhm.
And the amount of people that said cybersecurity was outstanding to me. I mean, it was
Yeah.
by far the number one topic.
It's
So that
it's a
doesn't surprise me
huge
at all.
deal.
Hmm.
And it's like all these like lawyers are risk averse because they understand the law very well. Um, they don't understand the data security space very
Mm-hmm.
well, and it's really dangerous. And it's not enough just to get like a cybersecurity malpractice insurance policy. You need to
Right.
actually implement the tools in your office.
Right. 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 Yeah. Absolutely, because it's such a reputation risk as well.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, as you would know, running a PR firm like that's a PR nightmare, right? You got
PR
data breach.
nightmare. Absolutely. Yeah, and the risk aversion is something that as marketing and PR people, it's sort of that opposite approach. So I see marketing and PR people by nature, you have to push the envelope, you have to take risks.
Yeah,
Marketing is not a risk adverse discipline. It's a let's try. I mean, we have to avoid shiny object syndrome. There has to be strategy, but in general you have to be willing to try some new things.
for sure.
There is,
Yeah,
yeah. So it's certainly a challenge working with lawyers who will point out anything and everything that could go wrong. I mean, if you
right.
spend too much time, why would you put anything out there? After a while, pretty much anything could go wrong. And the more risk you take out of it, the blander and less effective it gets. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. Take a
yeah,
chance. Come on,
yeah.
lawyers.
So, are there any companies in the legal tech space that you think are going to be the ones that are really kind of disrupting the space that are important to watch?
Yeah. Well, I think some of the bigger companies that have been around for a while are still
Mm-hmm.
doing pretty disruptive. Like Filevine, for example. I interviewed
Mm-hmm.
their CEO on a podcast the other day. They've been really doing a good job building out case management features in their system. And
Mm-hmm.
they've actually started to cross over to larger law firms, which is something that hasn't really been done before.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty big bellwether for where this is going. because a lot of those bigger firms prefer like document management systems. They never use case management systems. That's a big deal. Net Documents is document management and automation platform, and they've been taking up a ton of market share in the large legal space. And then there's some smaller companies which are doing interesting things as well. This company called Milestones. I talked to their CEO the other day. They're doing law firm notifications to clients based on workflows. So essentially no touch notifications, which I think is a really interesting thing to do, because most law firms are going to forget to do that, or they're going to try to do that in a manual way. And that's a really hard thing to do. And
what sort of notifications? Explain that to me a little bit more.
Emails, texts, any kind of notification you could send, and potentially with integrations as well. So if you're using WhatsApp or whatever for texting, you might be able to send a notification that way too. And I think that's something that like some of these companies lack, like these larger case management software companies. And then what I'm waiting to see actually is like a really hardcore legal project management or task management tools. You see a lot of uptick on like Asana, Trello, Notion, but there's no like Notion for legal. And I think something like that, I'm sure somebody may be developing that right now. Maybe I will.
That's a really great point. Yeah.
That I don't see anything that's really great.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either. Yeah. That's fascinating. Who are the people that are who are leading these companies? Do you see any sort of trend in terms of are they all former attorneys? Were they all do you see anything where they were smaller firms, bigger firms? What are you seeing?
Most of them, to my knowledge, are not lawyers. You see a few people who are attorneys who started companies. I talked about Filevine, Ryan Anderson, the CEO. He's an attorney. You look at Clio, Jack Newton, the CEO over there, not an attorney. If I had to guess, I would say that probably like 75% of the founders are not lawyers. They're people who are looking to like disrupt the legal industry.
Disrupt an industry, yeah.
And I think the part of that is obviously because they're less risk averse, and they look at this and they say, oh, there's so many solutions we can provide that lawyers just don't have the opportunity to even access. And the other thing I will say that like it's encouraging that like the legal investment has been going up significantly year over year until this year. I think because people write about recession, as we talked about, but nobody wanted to invest in legal technology for a long time because lawyers are intelligent, which means they're hard to sell to. The sales cycle is long. There's a lot of entrenched tools. There's all bad things, right? So like, I think it's encouraging that the investment has been coming in. And I think that's probably part of the reason that more lawyers, non-lawyers, I should say, have been attracted to this. And the other thing I find, honestly, is that you see a lot of lawyers who launch tech companies, but they can't get out of their own practice because they haven't figured out a way to manage that effectively or hand off the reins. And it's really tough to do two things like that at once, managing a large law firm and also trying to create a tech venture, because that's a very competitive space.
Yeah. Well, and that made me think too, the big challenge that I see a lot of law firms talking about is that, handing it over to that next generation. And I would imagine that tech plays a big role there. I mean, you've got to, law firms are kind of that quintessential, you don't own a company, you own a job almost, until you've built processes and systems and
oh man, you're so spot on. Like it's when after the pandemic, and during, most of the law firms I was talking to prior to that, they were like, I'm really inefficient. I don't know why. And then law firms started reaching out to me and they're like, hey, we need to start building processes and workflows. And I'm like, okay, we're getting somewhere now. Yeah. But you're totally right in that like lawyers don't build businesses like that.
Right.
And we haven't talked about this, but some states are now authorizing alternative business structures.
Right.
Where non-attorneys, non-law firms can be involved in law firms. And to be able to compete with organizations like that, you have to take chances in marketing. You have to build processes. And there's a chance that maybe you get acquired by some of those companies down the road. Like, I think lawyers are going to be forced to do this eventually, but honestly, it's about time because it only benefits them, frankly.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, a few of our clients are ALSPs. And, I often talk about how, law firms often were founded based on geography, and their business was built around a particular geographic market. but you're seeing kind of that rise of the niche, where, and obviously you're still regulated by where you can practice and in court. But I'm seeing more and more attorneys build brands that are national and international. And ALSPs are good at that too. They have a niche focus and can really deliver a niche, optimized service. And that's going to be something that the law firms have to compete with.
I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like if you look at like even the ethics rules, like before the pandemic, like half the states, you couldn't even have a brand name for your law firm. And all those rules came off the book almost simultaneously. Like the bona fide office stuff, like everybody knew that was BS. Right. But it took like a global pandemic to change that. And they're still behind the 8 ball. So it's wild. It's wild.
It really is. This has been fascinating. Tell me, are there any trends that we haven't touched on? I want to make sure. And then the other question I have is, just since we're kind of doing a broad overview of legal tech, what are some of the associations, conferences, if you're kind of dipping your toe into legal tech, let's say you're a managing partner, you want to start following the industry, getting information. What are some of those that you recommend that they pay attention to?
Yeah, so I can do a couple more trends first. If you want.
Yeah, let's do trends.
And I like how your cat popped into the screen here, mirroring my daughter who's come back and forth to the fridge for snacks. Well, 2 of the trends I haven't mentioned yet that I've been seeing is like a change in pricing models.
Yeah.
So I talked about firms moving away from the billable hour potentially. What do you move to? Like I see a lot more firms adopting evergreen retainers. I see more firms doing subscriptions and products. And what's interesting about that is that, like, in terms of service delivery, which is the second big trend, and that's changing as well. Like, the law firms only deliver services in one way, like painstaking, like cottage industry. Now, if you've got a law firm product, you can deliver documents. Like, what I never understood was, like, you got companies like LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer out there, and law firms are like, oh, they suck. Like, I don't like them. But law firms could offer the same services and capture those DIY clients as well. They just never did. There was no reason for it. So I'm seeing a lot more law firms looking at new pricing structures, which is going to communicate more value to the client, which is going to potentially be more valuable to the law firm as well, and which gets closer to like that total cost of representation, which is really what legal consumers want. And then I think that's going to change the service delivery significantly as well. So the law firms of the future are probably going to have or the law firm conglomerations with other businesses, whatever they are. Pricing model is going to be different. Service delivery is going to be different.
How will it change the service delivery?
I think it's just a totally different model for a law firm. If you built out, the way I look at this is like every law firm process is like analog, and now it's becoming digital. So let's take with my software company, we help a lot of law firms like offer estate plans. Right. Instead of doing like the traditional thing where you meet with somebody, we have law firms that are like faxing documents back and forth. You meet with somebody, you write stuff out, you painstakingly do mail merge on the will and stuff like that. You can make that an entirely consumer facing product where instead of having to have a staff, you can just say, hey, complete this chat conversation. And guess what? A document pops out on the other end and you're done.
Yeah.
You don't want to talk to a lawyer? Great. It's cheaper to do it this way. But if you do want to talk to a lawyer, we have options to do that. That's just a sea change for most law firms.
It really is. Yeah. But it's being driven by, I notice I have very little patience. I have some consultants that I deal with for my own business. I have one in particular who loves to call me. And
you're like, this could have been a text.
I'm to the point where I just, you start thinking about whether or not I need to switch providers because my patience has left the building for phone calls, and it's because honestly, in our personal lives, things like Amazon and Uber Eats and, I can have dinner delivered to my door and not speak to anybody, and so it changes your behavior in your work life. You lose that patience of things that could be digitized and automated and that aren't.
Can we not talk about how much I spend on Grubhub every month?
Yeah, no,
Can we leave that out?
Same, actually, and Amazon.
Yes. No, it's funny you mention that because that's totally true. Like, and somebody who I used to practice law, I don't anymore.
Mhm.
Now, as somebody who like hires lawyers from
Mhm.
time to time, I don't want to drive to your office. I don't
Mm-mm.
want to touch your pen. I just
Nope.
want to schedule something online, have a quick
Right.
meeting via Zoom, and be done. Like I
Yeah.
need to get on to the other stuff. And
Mhm.
lawyers have never operated that way. They sit at
Mhm.
the desk and they're like, how does this statute from 1843 apply to this document I'm drafting? Like, I'm not
Right.
interested in that. Lawyers love that though.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
love being inefficient.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's almost sort of taught to them, and it will change, as
It has to.
the
Yeah.
generational shift. So absolutely.
And you asked about conferences too,
Yeah.
and events
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Obviously weird time for that, right?
Yeah.
I don't get out to as many events as I used to,
Mhm.
but it's starting to come back. I'll tell you, like, the places I go to usually where I pick up some useful stuff is some of the user conferences for the
Mhm.
tech companies. So I
Mhm.
just went to Clio's cloud conference in Nashville a couple months
Mhm.
ago. They had about 2,000 people in person, 1,000 people online.
Wow.
That was a really good conference. Lots of
Yeah.
vendors there. Talked to a lot of people about what features they're
Mhm.
adopting. Filevine's got a conference. I think my case is maybe doing some conferences across the
Mhm.
country at some point. And then I also go to like the bar association conferences.
Mhm.
So you've got like solo and small firm conferences are pretty good. You've also got bench bar conferences,
Mhm.
which draw a lot of lawyers because the judges
Yeah.
go to those.
Mhm.
Some of those bar associations have tech conferences. And then I use the term bar associations broadly. I'm not talking just about state bar associations,
Right.
but also like county, city, specialty bar
Mhm.
associations. Those are generally good. And then, like some marketing companies throw really good conferences as well, like Crisp Video down in Atlanta. They do a
Mhm.
great conference. They give away
Oh, do they
Lamborghinis.
really?
Like, yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot.
Hmm.
There's a lot of different places you can go if you're
Mhm.
looking for legal information and want to meet
Mhm.
lawyers. ABA Tech Show has been around
Mhm.
forever. That's another
Yeah.
big one that a lot of people go to. So yeah, if you want to find legal tech conferences or legal conferences in general to go to, there's no shortage of places to go for sure.
Yeah.
I'd start with the vendors and the bar associations.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. It's great information. Well, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you joining me.
Yeah,
I
I've
want to
enjoyed
point
myself. I
people.
finished my iced tea.
I love it. I want to point people, if they want to learn more about you and your consulting, what's the best place for them to, where should they go?
Oh, sure. You can just go to the website. It's redcavelegal.com.
And
And
where'd you get
find
that
everything
name?
there.
What's the Red Cave? Wouldn't mind.
All right. Remember when I said I was an English major? I went
Yeah.
to like a small liberal arts college. It was a humanities program. And so it's kind of based on Plato's allegory of the cave. The idea is
Okay.
like you're in the cave, you're not seeing real things, you're not seeing like the forms, you're just seeing like shadows. And then you come
Oh.
out of the cave and like everything opens up to you. And then you understand the world. And I thought to myself, like, what would it look like to be out of the cave and looking back on it? And it's probably like very bright flames coming out because they're
Mhm.
projecting shadows on the wall. And that was the kind of vision I had for it. And then I designed a
That's
logo off of that.
very
So
deep. I
very,
love it.
very deep.
Yeah.
Yes, very deep.
Very deep. I love it. Well, great to talk to you. Thanks for joining me.
Same. Thank you. This is awesome. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.